What's going on, FE Nation? Happy Tuesday and welcome to another NBA DFS daily live stream here at fantasyalarm.com. I am James Grande, joined by Sean Mitchell. Sean, we did the podcast last night. You did the playbook this evening, and today you did the fast break core. Your core article. How you feeling about today's 10-game slate? Big slate on tap today, brother.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last night. Most of the totals are in the 220s or above. We just talked about, the Chicago-Washington total that's jumped like 8 points since last night. I think it's going to be total pandemonium. Like, I just think that there's going to be craziness. The slate is like so loaded. Like, it was really, really hard to write the playbook today because I just literally like so many different players. And I still, once I go back through the player list, the second and third time after doing the playbook, I'm like, oh man, I missed this guy. I'm like, man, I really could have put this guy in there. So I think it's going to be tough. I think there's going to be a lot of decisions that you're going to have to make on the slate tonight. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting slate.
Yeah, and a couple just interesting Vegas notes that we've seen some line movements. Chicago, Washington, as you alluded to, up to 238.5 total. That's clearly the creme de la creme of the slate in terms of totals. We have Golden State, Detroit up 4.5 points from last night or from when it opened. Another game that you and I discussed pretty thoroughly on last night's podcast. And then we have Milwaukee, Miami, which jumped 222.5 to 226.5. Milwaukee is now a 6-point favorite, opened as 3-point favorites, and that's coming with the news that Jimmy Butler is officially ruled out. So just three real big moves on this late. I will say, actually, Denver, Sacramento, too, our late night hammer is up to 227.5 from 223.5. So we've actually had four pretty good line moves throughout the day. All pretty much games that we want exposure to. We're not waiting on so much injury news. We're waiting on Kawhi Leonard. This line suggests that he's going to play. If you're reading into, spreads, the Clippers have jumped from a 7-point favorite to a 10.5-point favorite. Kawhi practiced yesterday. It seems like he's going to play. We'll see, right? I mean, it's a face laceration. Will we see a masked Kawhi Leonard tonight? Not that he doesn't kind of have that mask stoic look to begin with, but maybe mask on mask for tonight for Kawhi. Mask on, mask off. Shout out to Future. But with that said, let's jump into the slate, Sean. You did the playbook. You did the fast break article. We'll start off at the point guard position where you and I discussed it last night. There's two clear-cut top options at point guard, and it is Russell Westbrook, it is Stephen Curry. They're both projected to be lower drafted on the draft forecasted than I think you and I both anticipated. Without giving away all our content, I mean, both under 20% seems pretty ludicrous. Do you have a lean either way? I think we were both on Westbrook last night. I suspect we're both still there, but has that changed at all for you?
No, not really. I think, though, I'm more leaning towards Curry and GPP. I just think that he has a little bit more of he's got, for one, he got a cheaper price. I mean, That's all there is to that. It's not very much cheaper on DraftKings, but it is on FanDuel, which, both of them are projected to be very highly owned on FanDuel. But, for the DraftKings side, Steph Curry is I'm taking a lot more liking to him as the percentage of what I'm looking at. Looks like he's not going to be very high owned, which is kind of crazy. Considering we just saw him drop 56 fantasy points, against Chicago. Hopefully he's getting his footing back. He got to finally play a fourth quarter. He's averaging around 7 assists, 3 or 4 rebounds. It's looking really good. His usage is up. So I think that he might just slightly have a bit of an edge for GPPs where everybody's likely probably going to go Russell Westbrook here.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a wrong answer here, but I do think there is maybe some leverage on FanDuel where you're saving $1,200. So I do agree there. On DraftKings, I'm still going Russ because of triple-double upside. I will bite the bullet if he's slightly higher owned because I still think that triple-double upside really is just – I mean, again, if he shoots better, last game we're talking about 70 fantasy points. So let's move down the list. Let's go down to your mid-tier where I think a lot of people are going to live. And it's specifically Goran Dragic time, right? Because we know Jimmy Butler's been ruled out. We've seen the type of play Goran Dragic has has been at to start the year. And DraftKings really didn't raise his price at all. He's still $5,800. I don't think I can pass it up, even if he's a little higher owned. I think he's fine for all formats, but there are some guys around him like Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, would you consider pivoting in a tournament to Brogdon, or are you pretty much locked into Dragic all formats?
I don't know, because I mean, usually I look at Brogdon as a cash play too, but
Right.
that's kind of, I had Dragic listed as both formats, but I'm now, seeing as the ownership, and I think it'll probably be higher once we get closer to tip.
Yep.
I'm probably leaning more about cash with him as well, because his price is just right where it needs to be to fit a good cash lineup, I think. And, like I said, Brogdon, he's a little bit more expensive. So, obviously you need a little bit more of a floor there for cash. So Dragic for me now is probably more of a cash play. And I think that Brogdon, could slip into a GPP and be kind of, sneaky.
Yeah, I definitely think Brogdon generally goes under-owned, if we're being honest. Nobody really plays him, and he generally hits that 5x that you want in cash games. So I do agree. But we're speaking of GPPs, so we have to go down to the roller coaster that is Elfrid Payton, because that's what we're constantly on. When we're playing Elfrid Payton, it's the highest of highs, it's the lowest of lows, and he can absolutely win you a tournament on any given night, and he can absolutely you can not look at you have to look at your lineups at 7:30, Sean, because we know Elfrid Payton's not going to do anything. So give me your thoughts, especially considering how much you play GPPs, and especially considering you see 30% ownership on Elf over on FanDuel. But the price, man, under 5K, we talked about it last night on the pod. There is not a lot of value at this point guard position. Would you still consider, if you're playing FanDuel specifically, would you consider Elf even though he's 30% owned in GPPs?
Probably not. I mean, that's probably to a threshold on a 10% on a 10-game slate. I'm trying not to get anybody in the GPP that's going to be 30% owned. I don't want that. I don't want to be in tune with that much of the field. I would much rather probably pivot and go somewhere else. On DraftKings, where he's going to be half that ownership, and I'm not worried about the price tag because he's just a little bit more.
Right.
I would be way more prone, to playing him on DraftKings still. But on FanDuel, yeah, it's a no-go for me.
Yeah, I knew your answer. I just wanted the public to hear it too, because I think it's an important part of the process when you're playing GPP specifically, because we are not playing Elfrid Payton in cash, even at 4,800. We're not. No. But it is part of the process, I think, especially coming from a GPP aficionado like yourself. Let's move over to shooting guard, where we have some really, really elite guys. And it's going to be hard to kind of figure it out before a lock, because we're not going to know the Kawhi Leonard news pre-lock. We're going to know post-lock, and that kind of puts us in a weird position with Paul George, because he's really cheap on FanDuel. He's probably underpriced on DK if you take Kawhi Leonard off the floor. But, if Kawhi plays, I mean, why wouldn't you play Zach LaVine in the juiciest matchup on the board, or Bradley Beal in the same matchup, So how are you breaking down these top three guys? Who's your favorite in tournaments? Do you have a preference in cash? Talk to me about these three specifically.
Well, I mean, just kind of looking at their ownerships, obviously, like you mentioned on FanDuel, with Paul George being so cheap and Zach LaVine only being 100 less.
Right.
If we have any kind of, we just talked about it. We think that Kawhi is likely going to play with the line moving up 3 points. That's now you're getting into a double-digit spread, which we already know how that usually turns out. It's not good. And if that's going to be the case, then, yeah, I'm definitely not going to want Paul George. If any event that you're taking any kind of risk that he's, it could be in a potential blowout. So then you're just basically looking at, Brad Beal or Zach LaVine. I think a lot of people are going to not play Brad Beal simply because of the fact that Russ is back. So for me, that obviously attracts me a little bit more to him, because I actually think his ownership comes in a little bit lower than what we're seeing right now.
I agree.
LaVine, is in a really good spot in that same matchup. So even he could come in with quite a bit of low ownership. But, we do – I don't know if we've got the Markkanen news yet, which that could play a big factor.
Not official. Nothing official yet.
Okay. Well, see, that could play a big factor in the LaVine, whenever you're trying to analyze if you'd rather play LaVine or Bill, because that's huge. If Markkanen doesn't play, then Levine just opens up into a whole new role, kind of like you would have with Brad Beal without. I mean, I'm not trying to compare Lauri Markkanen to Russ here, but you go into that. Levine would be thrusted into a much larger role. Let me put it that way. So I guess it really just depends on a few things there. Obviously Kawhi, obviously Lauri Markkanen, but I will say where I wasn't as high on Bill, I'm kind of getting a little bit more. I'm getting there a little bit more because I just don't exactly love the price.
As you talking yourself into it as we go, I love it. Are you ready for the Zach LaVine usage rate without Lauri Markkanen on the floor this year?
I can only imagine.
So with 30-minute sample only, but we've only played 3 games. 42.4% usage, 1.5 fantasy points per minute. I will be playing Zach LaVine 100% in all formats if Lauri Markkanen is ruled out. It is the best matchup on the board. He has a 42% usage rate. There's nothing more that you could really ask for.
It's hard to argue against. Really hard to argue against.
I mean, the proof, Sean, is in the pudding. Not that I like pudding, but I digress. Let's move down the shooting guard list and into some mid-tier guys here like R.J. Barrett, Terrence Ross, Duncan Robinson. Ross and Robinson, pretty similar type of guys. They are going to shoot the basketball, and if their shot is on, we've seen them both break slates this year. We've seen them both be in tournament winners. Duncan Robinson was in every Christmas Day slate GPP winner. Terrence Ross has multiple winning lineup upside outings already this year. Break down these 3 guys. Obviously, Barrett is the favorite. He just does more than the other 2. So let's just exclude him. Between the 2 shooters, in Ross and Robinson, I mean, look, we love RJ Barrett here. John, you, I, Fancy, we've all really ad nauseum talked about RJ Barrett. So I don't think we need to discuss him much. You label him as GPP play. I agree, especially at the price. But talk to us about Ross and Robinson, because the Heat guys are garnering a lot of love with Jimmy Butler off the floor, but not Duncan Robinson here, Sean. Only, 1% projected ownership on FanDuel and only 2 on DK for a guy who's already has 8 threes in a game, and that bonus looms large on DK.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I would have to go with Robinson. I mean, he just has the more upside, I think, here. Terrence Ross is, and exactly why I labeled him a cash play is because he's a cash play. And the matchup is definitely not on his side. OKC has been good against the guard. I know they're a different team this year than they were last year, but they're still defending very well, especially on the perimeter. Terrence Ross is a setup shooter. I mean, he's got to hit shots. You've got to have shots. At least Robinson he's started to start rebounding a little bit more. He's going to take 3-pointers. We know he's going to. We saw him hit 8 on Christmas Day. And they're both sitting basically unowned. I really like the spot here for Duncan, considering he's going against Milwaukee, who runs really, really fast, nice fast-paced offense. So it's going to be a pace-up game for Miami without Butler on the floor. So yeah, I've got to go with Duncan Robinson here in GPP. Yeah. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I agree, and a pretty solid 110 team total for Miami tonight, even without Jimmy Butler. That I find that pretty interesting. That number is pretty solid. Some breaking news while we're at shooting guard. George Hill officially ruled out for Oklahoma City. That probably thrusts Hamidou Diallo into the starting lineup. And since we're at shooting guard, why don't we just talk about Diallo, who is shooting guard small forward eligible in DK. He's $3,800. He has played 20 minutes in both of the first 2 games this year. He has 6 rebounds in each game. He has gone for 7 and 8 points, respectively, 19.5 and 20 fantasy points. Do we like Diallo here, I guess, is what I'm asking, because Orlando's been playing very fast this year. Let's pull up the pace. Let's see what they're ranking, because they were ranked. They're 4th currently, Sean, in pace, the Magic. So does that put Diallo at 3,800 on your radar on a slate where we really don't have a ton of value?
In cash, maybe, but as well as I do, as soon as he hits that starting lineup and it's posted, and I'm sure it probably will be here, probably pretty clear before lock, his ownership is going to skyrocket. I mean, he's too cheap. We've already said it. There's not a lot of value on this slate. honestly, there's other guys that I still like around him that I'll use in tournaments because I just don't want to be that big of the field. I don't want to have that much. I want the leverage on the field. I don't want to be with them. So for me, yeah, it's probably still going to be a no.
And I tend to agree in terms of cash games. I do think Diallo is someone that is viable in cash because he's going to be highly owned. If we get word that he's in the starting lineup, we are going to see that ownership spike. We've seen it in the past where he has started, so this isn't something new. And like I mentioned earlier, he's given us 20 fantasy points in 2 straight. So it's not like we can't see that a third time in a row. And that gets us over 5x. It gets us about 5.2x. So again, cash games, perfect. 5.5 and 5.25 x value, perfect return for cash. I do think there is a little upside in tournaments, and that's only because if he were to get 30 minutes and let's say he puts up 27 or 28 fantasy points at 3.8K, I mean you're in a really good position at that point. About 7-8x return. But you don't play as much chalk as I do, so we're splitting hairs there. But there is another guy on this OKC roster in Luganitz Dort, or Lou as the folks know him as, has been great, and we're going right back to the well, and it's exactly what you put in your playbook. Going right back to the well. I had him in my value vault. You had him in the playbook. He's been really good, known as a defender. And I mean, he's been really good offensively, right? I mean, we're locking Lou Dort in all formats here, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's still not going to be owned tonight. His price only went up $300 on DraftKings, where I particularly would be using him, because of the 3-point. We know he's a 3-point shooter mainly. I mean, he's been playing, 32, 35 minutes. I don't care if it's a back-to-back. He's only 21 years old. I'm not worried about him being rested. Obviously, George Hill's out. We know Al Horford's out. The offense is going to have to come somewhere, and Lou is already stood up. I mean, he's already showing that he can do it this year. I mean, he's done it in 3. Going on. This will be the 3rd game for them with the the way the Rockets game was the very first of the year. So yeah, I'm totally fine with playing Dort again. I already have him in some of my lineups, and yeah, he's definitely in play for me.
Let's move over to small forward, where we have some contrarian options up top in Kawhi Leonard, who's currently questionable, Brandon Ingram, who for some reason is getting no love in a good matchup against Phoenix, and then Jaylen Brown, who is also getting no love, who's been just as good as Jason Tatum, and we're getting him for $2,000 cheaper on DraftKings. What's your lean here at small forward at the top, Sean?
I think we all can agree that getting Ingram at under 10% here is totally nuts. I get that it's against Phoenix. I get that they've been running a lot slower lately, so so have the Pelicans. But still, Ingram has been the guy here. He's playing 35 or more minutes a game to start the season, over 52 fantasy points in 2 of the 3 so far. He's taken 19, 17, and 23 shot attempts in the first 3 games as well. I mean, he's going to continue to be that focal point of the offense, and that's what you want to have. I also, it's him and Zion basically. Lonzo came in a little bit last game, threw up some good shots, made a little bit, had some good production, but Brandon Ingram is still the Pelican I think that you want to own.
Couldn't agree more, and he has looked every bit the part early on in this year. Let's move down to some value options, and someone I've actually been pretty intrigued by all day. And it's not something I am ever really intrigued in. I've called him white bread before because he's just boring. It's just a turkey sandwich with no lettuce and maybe slap on a piece of American cheese. And that's Harrison Barnes. He doesn't do anything great, but he does everything. And he plays a lot of minutes, and he can score. He's already had a big game against Denver. He went for 40 fantasy points against them. Do we like? I mean, 5,300 at 1% ownership in the late night hammer. Do you have any love for Harrison Barnes here?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely have it. I mean, he's taken 14, 15 shot attempts in 2 of the 3.
Right.
He's played 42 and 34 minutes in 2 of those 3, which one was being that Denver game. He was 1 board away from having back-to-back double-doubles out of the 2 out of the 3 games. He's never looked at. Nobody ever. To me, he's basically what you would look for in a cash play.
Right.
Most of the time, his floor is solid. His minutes are there. The production's there. And there's really just not a whole lot of other guys on this Kings team that you just look at and be like, yeah, like you just can walk without, Barnes has been that guy for him. I mean, he's continually played good minutes. Production's been there. And I just don't really think you can say anything negatively about him.
And just a little tidbit, Denver allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the small forward position early on in the year. So pretty good matchup for Barnes. Let's shoot over to power forward as our time is running low. I think we have a question with Giannis here because I'm looking and highlighting this ownership percentage at less than 10% on DraftKings, and I get the hesitation. But at the same time, if there was 2 people on this slate that I could say definitively be like, they can get me 70 fantasy points tonight, it's Russell Westbrook and it's Giannis Antetokounmpo. So my question to you is, how intriguing does that sub 10% ownership look to you, Sean?
I mean, that's very, 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 very intriguing. Right. Where you're looking for that upside. I get it. He's the highest price player on the slate. But just as you mentioned, we've seen this guy go for 65, 70, 75 with ease in less than 30 minutes a lot of the time. So sitting at sub 10% ownership here, it's really crazy because, if you think about it, this is the same team that knocked them out just here last year in the playoffs. So this is not just the regular game for Giannis either. This is a little bit of a revenge spot, and he's got it without Butler too. Right. So to me, I think this guy could possibly be the limit here for Giannis tonight. It's the matchup's going to be good. He doesn't have to deal with Butler. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays tonight.
Yeah, and they're coming off a blowout loss to the freaking Knicks. So your home court Knicks as you're sitting in MSG right now. Hanging in the booth with James Dolan, sipping on some Kool-Aid, listening to his band play some music. Let's move down the power forward chain here, and I think there's some interesting tournament options here. And Domantas Sabonis has been great. You label him as a cash play, but I wonder if that ownership percentage maybe flips the script there. I don't know if it does because the price, but we also have Zion Williamson, 8,100. He has been very popular to start the year. And I'm actually surprised to see Blake Griffin garnering this much ownership because you and I talked about it on last night's podcast, how intrigued we were with Griffin in tournaments. Just, but I guess it's the game environment here, right? Everyone loves to attack the Warriors this season, and it doesn't look like it's going to be any different on this slate. What say you about Blake here?
I don't know. It's kind of pulling me back a little bit. I didn't expect him, to be that. I didn't expect him to have 10% ownership.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of pullback. But in the same essence, like it's not the chalk where I think it's too much, like a 30%, like we talked about above. But at the price, he's still very, very much in play for me. I think just because of the simple fact that we did see him play 35 minutes already, 45 minutes, 44 minutes, 35 and 44 in the first 2 games. He's carrying a 22.5% usage rate, 3rd highest on the team. I mean, he's rested. He just took a day off. And now, like you said, he gets a Draymond-less Golden State Warrior team here with his team on a back-to-back, but not him. So I think he's going to see the ball a lot. I think that he's going to pretty much probably have the offense flow through him. And I think it could be good chalk. I mean, I just think that he can still be in play.
I never thought I'd hear you say good chalk, but we're not going to question it, and we're going to move on from there.
Times change.
All right, I don't need a long. I want a one-word answer here. To Naz Reid or to not Naz Reid on today's slate?
I'm not playing Naz Reid at almost 40% ownership.
Oh, I knew it.
I'm not doing it. Not a chance.
The price is good. Let me just throw it out there. The price is good. I think the matchup is pretty good. I will be playing Naz Reid.
Does it change, you think, that if Kawhi plays?
They've been starting.
That's a lot. That's a big contender.
So here's the thing. They've been playing Serge Ibaka like 20 minutes a game, and they've been playing Zubac 25 minutes a game. And we attacked the Clippers ad nauseum last year with Zubac starting. I think it could be a good advantage if we see mostly Zubac, or even if they go small. I think Nasri could take advantage either way. And plus, over 1.2 fantasy points per minute without Towns last year. So I do think there's some pretty good upside for Reed. I think he gets after and tries to make the most of his time. So even with Kawhi, it really wouldn't deter me that much. So I would still play Naz.
Fair enough.
Probably more cashy in single entry play, but because again, 40+% ownership in tournaments is never fun. Unless it's Karis LeVert on a 5-game slate with no Durant or Irving, because then But let's finish it up at the center position. We have some elite options to pick from here, Sean. I mean, Nikola Jokic has been incredible to start the year, just to say the least incredible. Joel Embiid is not getting any love in terms of ownership, and can put anybody in a blender in the post, so we don't really worry about matchup too much with Joel Embiid. He's that good offensively. We have Drummond against the Knicks against a foul-heavy Mitchell Robinson, and we have Nikola Vucevic against gosh dang Mike Muscala. And why don't we just throw Bam into the ring too, because there's no Jimmy Butler, and we know how good Bam can be, and he's the cheapest of all. Give me your assessment, and who's your favorite of this elite center position tonight?
The last time that we got Joel Embiid, which I think for me was opening night at really low ownership, he put up 52 fantasy points, which is not bad, but it's not like, it's not what you would hope for. But still, yeah, that's 5x at his price. And now we're talking about getting him once again at sub, 10% ownership. I know it's Toronto. Usually that scares a lot of people off because they think Toronto's still this great defensive team, but they're not. I mean, they've played in a lot of very fast-paced, not deep, non-defensive games. They've already done it a time or two this season. I really like it. They're going to be throwing out Aaron Baines at Joel Embiid here. Sorry to say, but he's not going to be able to keep up with Joel Embiid. Jokic, like you said, he's just Jokic. He's been playing really well. It is a back-to-back. John said that, he talked a little bit in the chat about, that being a back-to-back kind of worries him maybe a little bit. I'm not exactly as worried. But then, yeah, you have Drummond here, a little bit cheaper, who's got a decent matchup. I have not been, fading New York so much this year because they've actually been playing pretty decent defense.
They have.
But the one I really want to talk about is Bam. Love the spot. 1.31 fantasy point per minute without Butler on the floor, averaging right a shade below 23% usage rate. I mean, last year against Milwaukee, he averaged pretty much almost a triple-double, 13 points per game, 10.3 rebounds, 6.3 assists, almost a steal, and 1.1 blocks a game to go with almost a 25% usage rate. That was in 3 games. So really, 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 really enticed by Bam Adebayo tonight against Milwaukee.
Yeah, me too. And because the position is so deep, I think the ownership is kind of suppressed on Bam, and it's kind of spread out evenly. So I don't think any of these guys will be too highly owned, to be honest. And I think this is where we should live because there isn't a ton of guys below. I think, some we talked about, the landlord, the time lord, whatever lord you want to deem him, is an interesting tournament play. I think Mason Plumlee checks in again as a very safe cash game guy.
Sure.
Just considering, again, no Jahlil Okafor tonight, or he's doubtful, so not officially ruled out, but doubtful, and he's been really good, playing good minutes, so I think you can go there. We talked about Aaron Baines last night on the podcast, under 5K. There's not a lot of value, but I do agree. I think this is the range you want to live in. I think center is a position you want to allocate a lot of funds to tonight. And I think that about wraps it up, unless you got any final thoughts. I know all our content's out.
Good. Yeah, that's it. I mean, kind of changing things a little bit now with ownership coming out, but I really kind of want to see that last little run of ownership to see where it lands and then make some lineups, man. I'm ready to
go. Big shout out to Matt Sells, as always, for producing tonight's show, and we'll be back tomorrow with the whole shebang, the podcast, the playbook, whatever we have, it's going to be out tomorrow. So we'll catch you guys again tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Good luck.